Do people in China protest? Carrie Lam, the chief executive of Hong Kong, has been facing protests in opposition to her extradition bill, which would set up a system of exchange between Hong Kong and mainland China for criminals. What started off as a one-time demonstration against the bill has transformed into a general display of outrage over perceived encroachment on Hong Kong autonomy. But do we ever stop to think about the protests happening in the rest of China? Protests like these are labeled mass incidents. This is how the Ministry of Public Security broadly groups together instances of protests and unrest. Chinese protests occur more often than people think. In 2006 alone, the last year data was public, the Ministry of Public Security recorded over 87,000 mass incidences. The United States only had 4,700 protests in 2016. What is important to note is that, as stated, the criteria of what qualifies as a mass incident in China is very broad. A mass incident can be a simple illegal religious gathering or an unlawful gambling meetup. The Ministry of Public Security also stopped publicly releasing the number of mass incidences as of 2006. Most of these incidences focus on economic issues. The China Labor Bulletin, linked below, records thousands of economically motivated protests every year. Many of these are strikes because of withheld wages or poor working conditions. Most protests are not directly linked to the central government and are instead directed at businesses and or local government, which are often intermixed. Protests also focus on issues like the environment. Pollution in China is deadly and widespread, with more than 10% of all arable land being contaminated. Some of the biggest and most successful protests in China have been centered around environmental issues. In 2013, protests in the city of Kunming over the government's decision to construct a new oil refinery resulted in the mayor allowing for a referendum on the issue. The construction of a new refinery was unsoundly rejected. Most protests in China do not threaten the government's legitimacy. Contrary to the Hong Kong protesters, which are now demanding the resignation of Chief Executive Carrie Lam, most protesters in mainland China do not ask their leaders to step down. Instead, most protesters focus on local issues, like job security and the environment, where they can try to get concessions from business and local governments. This strategy of peaceful protest for very specific issues allows Chinese protesters to garner little controversy and gain wide popular support, increasing the odds that the government will concede to their demands rather than oppose them.